The morning sun rose over the golden wheat fields of New Harmony, like it had done for the past 12 years. Sarah Martinez stood on her porch, coffee in hand, watching her two children chase each other through the tall grass. The air smelled sweet, carrying the scent of blooming flowers from the community garden. Life was simple here on Kepler 442F, far from Earth's crowded cities and endless noise. 47,000 people called this place home. They were farmers, teachers, doctors, and artists who wanted something different. They wanted peace. They wanted to raise their families under open skies and teach their children the value of honest work. New Harmony had no military bases, no weapon factories, no strategic value. It was just a farming colony on the edge of human space. Nobody expected the ships. They appeared in orbit without warning at 10:47 a.m. local time. Massive vessels, dark and angular, blotting out the sun. The colony's single defense satellite sent out an automatic distress signal before it was vaporized in a flash of blue light. On the ground, people stopped what they were doing and looked up at the sky with confusion, then fear. Sarah dropped her coffee cup. It shattered on the wooden boards of her porch. Her children stopped playing and ran to her, sensing something was terribly wrong. She pulled them close, her heart hammering in her chest. Above them, the alien ships moved into position with cold precision. The colony administrator, James Chen, rushed to the communication center. His hands shook as he opened all frequencies, broadcasting in every known language. This is New Harmony Colony. We are a peaceful settlement. We have no military presence. Please respond. We mean you no harm. There was no response, only silence from the dark ships above. Then the bombardment began. Beams of superheated energy lanced down from orbit, each one turning a square kilometer of land into molten glass. The community center where children had been rehearsing a play disappeared in a flash of white light. The medical clinic evaporated. The school, the farms, the homes, all of it burning. People ran in every direction, screaming, crying, desperately seeking shelter that did not exist. Parents covered their children with their own bodies. Old couples held each other tight. There was nowhere to hide from the fury that fell from the sky. Sarah managed to get her children into the basement of their house. She held them as the walls above shook and cracked. Her daughter, only 6 years old, asked through tears why this was happening. Sarah had no answer. She could only hold them tighter and whisper that she loved them. The bombardment lasted 6 hours. Methodical. Complete. The aliens moved their ships in a careful pattern, ensuring every settlement, every farm, every structure was destroyed. When they finished, they scanned the planet one final time. Satisfied that nothing lived, they jumped away into hyperspace as quickly as they had arrived. New Harmony was silent. 3 days later, the survey ship Pathfinder dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Captain Sarah Chen was looking forward to her routine supply run. New Harmony always welcomed them with open arms, fresh food, and warm hospitality. She smiled as her ship approached the planet, already imagining the taste of real bread and butter. Then her sensors officer spoke, his voice tight with confusion. Captain, I'm not picking up any communication signals from the colony. No navigation beacons, no traffic control, nothing. Sarah frowned. Try all frequencies. Maybe their transmitter is down. They tried. Silence answered them. As the Pathfinder entered orbit, the crew gathered around the viewing screens. What they saw made them freeze in horror. The planet's surface was scarred with massive burn marks. Where green fields and small towns should have been, there was only blackened earth and pools of cooling glass. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Get me visual on the main settlement, now. The image that appeared on the screen would haunt her for the rest of her life. Nothing remained. No buildings, no roads, no sign that 47,000 people had ever lived and loved and laughed there. Only destruction. Oh God, someone whispered behind her. Another crew member was crying quietly. Sarah forced herself to think like a captain even as her heart shattered. Launch the recovery drones. Search for survivors. Search for anything. The drones found no life, but they found something worse. In the rubble of what had been the communication center, they recovered the last transmission logs. Sarah made herself listen to them. She heard James Chen's desperate pleas for mercy. She heard screams. She heard children singing in the background before the signal cut to static. She heard a mother's voice saying, "I love you," over and over. Then nothing. Just the empty hiss of dead air. Sarah stood in the ruins the next day wearing a protective suit. Her crew had begged her not to go down to the surface, but she had to see it with her own eyes. She had to bear witness. She found a small metal toy in the ashes, a spaceship, ironically. Its paint was melted away, but she could tell it had been loved by some child. Held in small hands, flown through imaginary space battles, she closed her fist around it, feeling the heat still radiating from the ground. Sarah activated her communicator with a voice that shook with barely controlled rage. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the survey ship Pathfinder to Earth Command. Priority Alpha. New Harmony colony on Kepler 442F has been completely destroyed. All 47,000 colonists are dead. This was not an accident. This was murder." She paused, looking at the melted toy in her hand. "Someone needs to answer for this. Someone needs to pay." The message traveled through hyperspace relays, jumping from station to station, spreading across human space like wildfire. Earth received it first, then Mars, then the outer colonies. By the end of the week, every human being in the galaxy knew what had happened to New Harmony, and something changed in humanity that day. Something fundamental and terrifying. A line had been crossed that could never be uncrossed. The Zethrian Concordat had made their statement. They had shown humanity what they thought of them, nothing. Insects to be brushed aside. Creatures too weak to matter. They would soon learn how wrong they were. The United Terran Assembly building in Geneva had never been this full. Every seat was occupied. Representatives from Earth's nations, Mars colonies, the belt stations, and the outer settlements packed the chamber. People who normally argued about trade routes and mining rights now sat in unified silence. On the massive screens overhead, images from New Harmony played on repeat. Blackened Earth, melted structures, the recovery drones finding nothing but ashes. No one looked away. They forced themselves to watch. They forced themselves to remember. Secretary General Amanda Torres stood at the podium, her face pale but determined. "The Zethrian Concordat has sent us a message. They attacked a defenseless farming colony. They killed 47,000 civilians, men, women, and children who only wanted to live in peace." Her voice echoed in the chamber. "They did this without warning. Without provocation, without mercy. And according to our intelligence, they expect us to do nothing. They expect us to be afraid." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of representatives from 100 different worlds. "The question before this assembly is simple. What will be our response?" The vote took less than 5 minutes. It was unanimous. Every nation, every colony, every faction spoke with one voice for the first time in human history. Total mobilization. Complete military deployment. They would respond, and the response would be overwhelming. Admiral Marcus Kane watched the vote from his small house on the coast of Scotland. He was 72 years old with gray hair and scars from 3 different wars. He had retired 5 years ago after losing his wife to illness. He spent his days fishing and trying not to think about the past. His communicator buzzed. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. "Admiral Kane, this is Secretary General Torres. We need you." Marcus closed his eyes. He had known this call would come. "I'm retired, ma'am. I know. But you're also the best fleet commander humanity has ever produced. The Assembly has authorized the creation of the largest military force in our history. We're calling it the Armada of Retribution, and we need you to lead it." Marcus thought about his wife, about the grandchildren he would never have, about the quiet life he had tried to build. Then he thought about 47,000 people who would never get old, never retire, never fish on a quiet beach. "When do I start?" he asked, immediately. Within hours, Marcus was on a shuttle to the orbital command station above Earth. As he traveled through the atmosphere, he could see lights blazing from every shipyard on the planet. Humanity was already at work. Across human space, the mobilization was unlike anything ever seen. On Mars, 3 massive shipyards went to triple shifts. Workers welded hull plates while sparks flew like fireworks. In the asteroid belt, mining ships were being retrofitted with missile pods and armor plating. Every colony with a defense force sent what they could spare. Earth's military factories roared to life after decades of minimal production. Humanity had enjoyed relative peace for 50 years, but they had not forgotten how to build war machines. The knowledge was still there, buried in databases and old mines. Now it surged forth like a dam breaking. Civilians volunteered in staggering numbers. Young people who had grown up in peace enlisted by the millions. Older veterans, some who had not worn a uniform in 30 years, reported for duty. A woman in her 60s showed up at a recruitment center on Luna with her pilot certification from the last war. They signed her up immediately, But it was not just Earth's military that responded. The colony sent everything. Merchant ships arrived at military stations, their owners offering their vessels to be armed. Mining ships, cargo haulers, even luxury yachts, all were transformed into warships. Marcus stood in the command center, watching the numbers climb on the display screens. 800 ships confirmed, 820, 847. His second-in-command, Commander Patricia Williams, stood beside him. She was young, only 40, but she had survived the Proxima raid 10 years ago. She understood what this was about. "That's every combat-capable ship we have, sir," she said quietly, "and a lot that barely qualify." Marcus nodded. "It'll have to be enough." Meanwhile, in Zethrian space, the Concordate's leaders received the first intelligence reports about humanity's response. High Counselor Vexthor read them with amusement in his private chambers. His scaled skin was deep purple, marking him as one of the highest caste. He had led the Concordate through the conquest of 17 species. Humans would be simple. "They are sending a fleet," his intelligence officer reported. "Approximately 800 ships." Vexthor made a sound like laughter. 800? "We have over 2,000 warships. Send a screening force of 300 vessels to meet them. Destroy their little fleet and then offer terms of vassalage. They will learn their place." The intelligence officer hesitated. "Counselor, our analysts have reviewed human history. They are remarkably violent. Their entire culture is built on conflict. Perhaps we should approach with more caution." Vexthor's eyes narrowed. "Are you questioning my judgment? We have conquered 17 civilizations. These humans are nothing. Dismissed." The officer left, but his concerns were not unfounded. In the lower ranks of the Zethrian military, unease was growing. Young officers had accessed human cultural databases. They had read human history, world wars, nuclear weapons, conflicts that lasted generations. These were not a peaceful species playing at war. These were born warriors who had chosen peace. Admiral Kane spent the next 6 weeks preparing his fleet. He drilled them relentlessly. Mock battles, formation practice, emergency procedures. Some of his captains complained about the harsh schedule, but Kane was unmoved. "The Zethrians outnumber us," he told them in a video conference. "They have better ships and more resources. Our only advantage is that we know what we're fighting for. Every one of you needs to remember why we're doing this. Remember New Harmony. Remember those 47,000 souls who died for nothing." He paused, his weathered face hard as stone. "The Zethrians think we're weak because we prefer peace. They're about to learn that we choose peace because we know exactly what we're capable of in war. We have been fighting and killing each other for thousands of years. We know violence. We know fury, and we're about to teach them what happens when you wake a sleeping predator." The fleet captains listened in silence. They understood. Humanity had clawed its way up from caves to starships through endless conflict. They had nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times, but they had survived. They had learned. They had become something terrifying, a species that could unleash hell but chose not to, until someone gave them a reason. Dr. Yuki Tanaka worked in a secure research facility below Geneva, finishing the last weapon system. It was based on quantum entanglement technology that allowed every ship in the fleet to share targeting data instantaneously. No delay, perfect coordination. The Zethrians had never seen anything like it. "Will it work?" Marcus asked her during an inspection. Yuki smiled tiredly. "It'll work. They won't know what hit them." The Armada of Retribution gathered in orbit above Earth. 847 ships of every size and shape. Sleek destroyers from Earth's Navy, rugged cruisers from the Colonial Defense Forces, converted merchant ships bristling with missiles. They formed up in perfect formation, a wall of metal and fury. Marcus stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Indomitable. Through the windows he could see Earth below, blue and beautiful. "Worth protecting, worth fighting for." "All ships report ready, Admiral," Commander Williams said. Marcus took a deep breath. "Open a channel to the fleet." His face appeared on screens across 800 ships. Thousands of crew members stopped what they were doing to listen. "We are about to begin a journey into darkness," Marcus said simply. "We're going to face an enemy that thinks we're nothing. They murdered innocent people. They expect us to accept it. They're wrong." He paused. "Some of you won't come back. I won't lie to you about that. This will cost us. But we're going anyway because someone has to stand up and say no more." Someone has to make them understand that human lives matter. That New Harmony mattered. His voice grew harder. Let's go teach them that lesson. All ships prepare for jump. Next stop, Zethrian space. The Armada of Retribution jumped into hyperspace, leaving Earth behind. They were going to war. The journey to Zethrian space would take 6 weeks, jumping through hyperspace in careful stages. Each jump required precise calculations and left the ships vulnerable while their drives recharged. Admiral Kane used this time to drill his fleet constantly. They ran combat simulations every day, sometimes twice a day. The crews complained at first. They were exhausted, running on minimal sleep while Kane pushed them harder and harder. But gradually they began to understand. They were preparing to face an enemy with superior numbers and technology. Their only hope was to be better trained, better coordinated, and more determined. Commander Elena Volkov sat in her quarters after another brutal 16-hour drill, staring at a photograph. It showed her sister's family at a harvest festival on New Harmony 2 years ago. Her niece and nephew smiled at the camera, holding up prizes they had won at the fair. All of them were dead now, turned to ash in an instant. Elena had been on a cargo run to Mars when it happened. She had survived by pure chance. Now she commanded a destroyer squadron in the Armada, and she had volunteered for every dangerous assignment Kane offered. She wanted to be at the front when they reached the enemy. She needed to look them in the eye. Lieutenant Jamal Rodriguez was only 23 years old. He piloted a fighter from the carrier constellation and had never seen real combat. At night, he wrote letters to his mother back on Earth, trying to explain what he was feeling. Fear, yes, but also purpose. He had joined the military to serve something bigger than himself. Now he had that chance. Do you think we'll win? His wingman asked one night in the mess hall. Jamal thought about it. I think we have to. That's not the same thing, but it's enough. Meanwhile, ahead of the fleet, humanity sent a message into Zethrian space. It was short and translated into their language. It played on every frequency, repeated endlessly like a drumbeat. New Harmony. You will answer for New Harmony. That was all. Just those 7 words over and over. The Zethrians intercepted it and laughed. Their propaganda broadcasts mocked the humans, calling them weak and primitive. High Counselor Vexthor gave a speech declaring that humanity would be crushed like all the others who had opposed the Concordat. But not everyone in Zethrian space was laughing. Junior officers who had studied human culture began to feel a growing sense of dread. They read reports about human history and found themselves disturbed. These were not the peaceful farmers that the Concordat claimed they were. These were survivors of countless wars who had somehow learned to live together. One young Zethrian captain named Telvar tried to warn his superiors. The humans have a saying, he told his commander. Speak softly and carry a big stick. I fear we have only seen them speak softly. His commander dismissed his concerns. They are insects. We will crush them, Telvar said nothing more. But he could not shake the feeling that they were all making a terrible mistake. The Armada jumped through system after system, getting closer to Zethrian territory. At each stop, Kane gathered his command staff to review intelligence and refine their battle plans. They studied every scrap of information about Zethrian ship design and tactics. Dr. Yuki Tanaka gave presentations on the quantum targeting system she had developed. It would allow every ship in the fleet to share sensor data instantly, creating a perfect picture of the battlefield. The Zethrians fought as individual ships or small squadrons. Humanity would fight as a single organism. The key is coordination, Yuki explained to the assembled captains. When one ship acquires a target, every ship knows about it immediately. When one ship is damaged, others can adjust to cover. We move as one. Captain Sarah Chen, who now commanded the destroyer Vigilance, raised her hand. She was the same officer who had discovered New Harmony's destruction. She had transferred from the survey service to join the Armada. What about jamming? She asked. Won't they try to disrupt our communications? Yuki smiled. That's the beautiful part. Quantum entanglement can't be jammed. It's instantaneous and unbreakable. They can fill space with interference all they want. We'll still be connected. The captains absorbed this information with grim satisfaction. Every advantage mattered when you were outnumbered more than 2 to 1. Commander Williams noticed that Admiral Kane had grown quieter as they approached enemy territory. He spent long hours alone in his quarters reviewing casualty estimates and battle projections. The numbers were not good. Even with their advantages, they would lose ships. Many ships. Thousands of people under his command would die. She found him one night staring out at the stars through the viewing port. "Can't sleep, sir?" she asked. Kane shook his head. "I keep thinking about New Harmony, about how those people had no warning, no chance. Now I'm leading thousands more into danger. What if I'm wrong? What if this is just throwing away more lives?" William stood beside him. "With respect, sir, those are not the same thing. New Harmony was murdered in cold blood. Our people are going into battle with their eyes open, fighting for something that matters. That's different, is it? They're still dead at the end. Maybe, but they die as warriors, not victims. Sometimes that's all we can offer." Kane was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Thank you, Commander." On the 28th day of their journey, they crossed into Zethrian territory. Alarms sounded across the fleet as sensors detected the first enemy ships. A screening force, just as intelligence had predicted. The Zethrians had sent 300 vessels to meet them, more than a third of what humanity had brought, sent casually as if swatting at flies. Admiral Kane studied the tactical display. The enemy ships were positioning themselves at the edge of the threshold point system, a strategic location with multiple jump routes. They intended to destroy the human fleet here and prevent any advance deeper into Zethrian space. "They're not even being subtle," Williams observed. "They think they can just line up and blast us out of space." Kane smiled without humor. "Good, let them be confident. Arrogance is a weakness we can exploit." He opened a channel to the entire fleet. This was it. The moment everything had been building toward. Thousands of people waited for his words. "All ships, this is Admiral Kane. The enemy is ahead of us. They outnumber this part of our fleet, and their ships are powerful. But we have something they don't. We have purpose. We have unity. And we have fury." He paused, his voice growing harder. "Remember why we're here. Remember New Harmony. Remember every man, woman, and child who died screaming while these creatures watched from orbit. They think we're weak. They think we'll break. They're about to learn the cost of that mistake." Kane looked at the tactical display one more time. "All ships, battle formation Delta. Engage at maximum range. Show them what happens when you wake a sleeping giant. For New Harmony." Across 800 ships, the response echoed back. "For New Harmony." The fleet moved forward in perfect formation, every ship in its assigned position. The quantum targeting system linked them together into a single weapon. On the Zethrian ships, commanders watched with confusion. The human fleet was advancing directly. No clever maneuvers, no fancy tactics, just a straight approach. High Commander Zexkor, leading the Zethrian screening force, felt contempt. "These fools think they can face us head-on. All ships prepare to fire. We'll vaporize them in the first volley." But Telvar, serving as a tactical officer on Zexkor's flagship, felt his scales prickle with warning. Something was wrong. The humans were too calm, too coordinated. This did not look like a desperate charge. This looked like a plan. "Commander," he said urgently, "I recommend caution. Their formation is too perfect." "They're doing something—" "Silence!" Zexkor snapped. "Fire on my command." The two fleets closed the distance. Weapon systems charged. Targeting computers locked on. In the cold void of space, lit only by distant stars, humanity and the Zethrian Concordat were about to collide in the largest battle either species had ever fought. Admiral Kane sat in his command chair, outwardly calm, inwardly calculating every variable. He had spent 50 years learning the art of war. He had studied every battle in human history, from ancient times to the present. He knew that sometimes, when you were outgunned and outnumbered, the only answer was to hit first, hit hard, and never stop hitting until the enemy broke. "All ships," he said quietly, "weapons free, fire at will." The Armada of Retribution opened fire and space erupted into hell. The Battle of Threshold Point began with a storm of missiles and energy beams that turned the darkness of space into a wall of light. The Zethrian commanders expected an easy victory, but within the first 30 seconds they realized something was terribly wrong. Human missiles did not come in simple waves. They came in swarms, thousands of them, each one coordinated with perfect precision. The quantum targeting system allowed every missile from every ship to work together like a single mind. When Zethrian point defense destroyed one missile, the others adjusted their approach instantly. The Zethrian ships fired back with massive energy cannons, the same weapons that had glassed New Harmony. But where they expected to see human vessels exploding, they saw something else. The human ships had layered their defense systems in ways the Zethrians had never encountered. Point defense lasers swatted down incoming fire. Ablative armor burned away but protected the hull beneath. Decoy drones confused targeting sensors. High Commander Zexkor stared at his tactical display in growing disbelief. How are they doing this? Their technology should be inferior. Telvar, the young officer who had tried to warn him, worked frantically at his station. Sir, they are coordinating in a way we have never seen. Every ship is sharing data. They know where every missile is, where every shot is coming from. They are fighting as one entity. Then we will simply overwhelm them with firepower. Zexkor ordered. All ships focus fire on their lead vessels. But the humans had anticipated this. As Zethrian ships concentrated their fire on the front ranks, the rear ships unleashed devastating volleys into the enemy formation. The quantum targeting system identified weak points and concentrated fire there. A Zethrian cruiser took hits from 17 different human ships simultaneously. Its shields collapsed and its hull ruptured, spilling atmosphere into space. Admiral Kane watched the battle unfold on his screens, his face carved from stone. They are still fighting like individuals, he observed to Commander Williams. They have not learned to think as a fleet. Should we exploit that, sir? Already am. Execute pattern midway. The human fleet suddenly split into 3 groups, a maneuver named after an ancient naval battle from Earth's history. The Zethrians, expecting a conventional engagement, found themselves flanked from 2 sides while the center held their attention. It was a simple tactic, but executed with such precision that the enemy had no time to respond. Lieutenant Jamal Rodriguez flew his fighter through the chaos, his heart pounding. His squadron had launched to provide close support and anti-missile defense. Around him, space was filled with death. Ships burned, missiles streaked past, and beams of energy cut through the darkness. Stay in formation, his squadron leader barked over the radio. Cover the Vigilance, she is taking heavy fire. Jamal pushed his engines hard, racing toward Captain Sarah Chen's destroyer. The Vigilance had taken damage to its port side and was struggling to maintain position. Zethrian fighters were moving in for the kill. Not today, Jamal muttered. He armed his missiles and locked onto the nearest enemy fighter. Fox 3! The missile lanced out and caught the Zethrian fighter in its engine section. It exploded in a brief flash of light. Jamal's wingmen took out 2 more. The Vigilance launched a spread of missiles in gratitude, driving off the remaining attackers. But the battle was far from one-sided. The Zethrians had numbers and firepower. A human frigate, the Dauntless, took a direct hit from a Zethrian battleship. Its reactor exploded and 200 crew members died in an instant. The destroyer Richmond lost power and drifted helplessly until a Zethrian cruiser finished it with a barrage of fire. Commander Elena Volkov led her squadron deep into the enemy formation, ignoring orders to maintain distance. She had promised herself she would look the enemy in the eye. Now she did, as her ships traded fire at point-blank range with Zethrian cruisers. Volkov, pull back, Williams ordered over the command channel. You are too deep. Negative, Elena replied, her voice cold as ice. We have targets, engaging. Her destroyer, the Retribution, fired its main railgun at a Zethrian command ship. The hypersonic slug punched through shields and armor like paper, coring the enemy vessel from bow to stern. It broke apart, dying slowly. But Elena's aggressive tactics had a cost. The Zethrians concentrated fire on her squadron. The destroyer Ajax took multiple hits and fell out of formation, its engines dead. The frigate Hammer exploded when its magazine was penetrated. Retribution is taking heavy damage, Elena's tactical officer shouted. Shields at 15%. Hull breaches on decks 3 and 4. Elena ignored the alarms blaring around her bridge. Keep firing. Target that cruiser on our starboard side. They fired, and the cruiser's bridge section disappeared in a ball of flame. But return fire hammered the Retribution, and Elena felt her ship shudder under the impacts. Sparks flew from control panels. The lights flickered. Ma'am, we need to fall back, her first officer pleaded. Elena thought of her sister, her niece and nephew. The ashes of New Harmony. No, we keep fighting. We make them pay for every meter of space. The Zethrians were learning slowly that they had not faced an enemy like this before. Human ships kept fighting even when damaged. They refused to retreat, refused to surrender. A human destroyer with half its hull blown away continued firing until its power finally failed. A frigate with its bridge destroyed kept launching missiles on automatic until it ran out of ammunition. then tried to ram the nearest enemy ship. High Commander Zexkor felt fear for the first time. What kind of species fights like this? They are throwing away their lives. Telvar understood what his commander did not. They are not throwing away their lives, sir. They are spending them. For revenge. For justice. And they do not care what it costs. The tide of battle began to turn. The human fleet, despite losses, maintained perfect coordination. The Zethrians, despite their numbers, could not match that unity. Human ships covered each other, rotated damaged vessels out of the line, and concentrated fire with devastating effectiveness. A group of 20 human ships focused their fire on a Zethrian battleship. The massive vessel's shields held for almost 30 seconds before collapsing. Railgun rounds and missiles tore it apart piece by piece. Its reactor went critical, and the explosion took out 2 nearby Zethrian cruisers. "Sir, we have lost 70 ships," Zexkor's tactical officer reported in panic. "Enemy losses are approximately 90, but they are still maintaining formation and effectiveness." Zexkor stared at the tactical display. His perfect trap had become a nightmare. These humans were not breaking. They were not running. They were killing his ships with cold efficiency and absolute determination. "All ships fall back to Rally Point Gamma," he ordered. "We will regroup and—" "Sir, sensors detect massive power surge from the human flagship." Admiral Kane had been waiting for this moment. The Indomitable and its sister ships had been charging their main weapons. Older technology, but devastating at close range. Now he gave the order. "All dreadnoughts full volley. Fire." 6 human dreadnoughts fired their main batteries simultaneously. The massive energy beams crossed space in seconds and struck the Zethrian flagship. Its shields, already weakened by earlier damage, collapsed entirely. The beams burned through armor, through hull, through everything, until they reached the ship's reactor core. High Commander Zexkor had one last moment to understand his failure. Then the flagship exploded, and he died still trying to comprehend how these inferior creatures had destroyed him. The destruction of the flagship broke the Zethrian formation. Without central command, the individual ships began to panic. Some tried to fight, some tried to flee. The human fleet showed no mercy. They had come for retribution, and they would have it. Commander Volkov's ship, the Retribution, was barely functional. Life support was failing. The engines were offline. But the weapons still worked. When a fleeing Zethrian cruiser passed within range, Elena gave one last order. "All power to the reactor." "Overload it." Her crew stared at her. "Ma'am, that will—" "I know what it will do. Evacuate the ship now, that's an order." Her crew scrambled for the escape pods. Elena stayed at her post, hands on the controls, watching the Zethrian cruiser try to escape. She thought of her sister one last time, of bright summer days and children's laughter. "For New Harmony," she whispered. The Retribution's reactor went critical. The explosion was massive, a miniature sun blooming in the darkness. The blast wave caught 16 Zethrian cruisers and destroyers, overwhelming their shields and tearing them apart. Elena Volkov died instantly, painlessly taking the enemy with her. Across the fleet, her sacrifice was noted, recorded, remembered. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, less than 50 Zethrian ships limped away into hyperspace. The rest were debris floating in the cold void. The human fleet had lost 94 ships and thousands of crew, but they held the field. Admiral Kane sat in his command chair, surrounded by damage reports and casualty lists. His flagship had taken hits but remained functional. He felt no joy in the victory, only grim satisfaction. "Send a message to the Concordat," he ordered. "Tell them we are coming to their homeworld next. Tell them to evacuate their civilians. Tell them we are not like them." Commander Williams looked at him. "Will they listen, sir?" "Probably not, but we will offer them the mercy they never showed New Harmony. Because that's what makes us different. That's what makes us human." The Armada of Retribution repaired what they could, counted their dead, and prepared to jump deeper into Zethrian space. They were going to the enemy's home. They were going to end this war. The footage from Threshold Point reached the Zethrian homeworld 3 days later. High Counselor Vexthor watched it in his chambers, his purple scales paling with each passing minute. 300 ships destroyed. The humans had lost fewer than 100. Impossible. Yet it had happened. He called an emergency meeting of the Concordat High Council. The vast chamber filled with leaders from across their empire, all of them watching the same footage with growing horror. They fight like demons, one counselor whispered. They do not retreat even when destroyed. Their coordination is perfect, another added. We have never seen anything like it. Vex Thor stood, trying to project confidence he did not feel. We still outnumber them. Our main fleet has over 1,700 ships. We will crush them at our homeworld and end this. But Telvar, who had survived the battle and been promoted to fleet coordinator, stood to speak. The council allowed it, desperate for any insight into their enemy. Honored counselors, I have fought these humans. I have watched them. They are not like the other species we have conquered. They do not fight to win territory or resources. They fight for revenge, for justice, and they will not stop until we are destroyed or they are. What do you suggest? Vex Thor demanded coldly. I suggest we evacuate our cities and seek peace terms while we still can. The council erupted in angry voices. Evacuate, surrender. The Zethrian Concordat had never surrendered in its 1,000-year history. But Telvar's words planted seeds of doubt in minds that had never known defeat. The Armada of Retribution spent 2 weeks repairing and regrouping. They had captured some Zethrian supply stations and taken what they needed. The enemy made no attempt to stop them, pulling all forces back to defend their core worlds. Admiral Kane used the time to mourn the dead. Each day he reviewed the casualty list personally, reading every name. Commander Elena Volkov, Lieutenant James Murphy, Captain Hassan al-Rashid, thousands more, each one a person with dreams and loved ones, now gone forever. Commander Williams found him one night in the ship's memorial hall, where holographic names floated in the air like stars. You cannot carry all their weight. Sir, she said gently, I'm their commander. I sent them into battle. Their deaths are my responsibility. They chose to come. Every one of them volunteered. You did not force them. Kane was quiet for a long moment. Do you think what we are doing is right? All this death, all this destruction. New Harmony is still gone. Nothing we do will bring them back. Williams considered her words carefully. No, we cannot bring them back. But we can make sure it never happens again. We can teach the galaxy that human lives matter, that you cannot murder our people without consequence. Is that not worth the cost? I hope so, Kane said softly. God, I hope so. The fleet jumped toward the Zethrian homeworld. They traveled through systems that had been conquered by the Concordat, past species that had been enslaved or wiped out. Some of those species watched the human fleet pass with hope in their hearts. Perhaps these humans would succeed where they had failed. On the 32nd day after leaving Earth, the Armada emerged at the edge of the Zeth Prime system. Ahead of them, the Zethrian homeworld hung in space like a jewel, blue and green and beautiful. Surrounding it was the largest military fleet ever assembled by the Concordat. Over 1,700 ships arranged in defensive layers. The odds were more than 2 to 1 against humanity. But the humans had learned at Threshold Point that numbers alone did not guarantee victory. Admiral Kane studied the enemy formation. They had learned from the last battle. Their ships were positioned to support each other, with overlapping fields of fire and multiple layers of defense. It would be a harder fight than before. They are scared, Williams observed. Look at their positioning. They are fighting defensively, not offensively. Kane nodded. Fear makes you cautious. Caution makes you predictable. We can use that. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Kane. Today we face the enemy's main strength. They outnumber us significantly, and they fight to defend their home. This will be the hardest battle any of us have ever faced. He paused, looking at the faces of his crew on the bridge, young and old from Earth and Mars and 100 colonies, all of them willing to die for what they believed in. But we did not come here to lose. We came here to deliver a message. We came here to show the galaxy that humanity will not be pushed around, will not accept the murder of our people, will not bow to anyone. Today we fight for New Harmony. Today we fight for ourselves. Today we show them what happens when you make humanity angry. His voice grew harder. All ships attack formation. Engage at will. For New Harmony. For humanity. For every soul we have lost along the way. The fleet responded as one. For New Harmony. The Battle of Zeth Prime began. The fighting was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 2 massive fleets collided in the gravity well of the Zethrian homeworld, and space became a nightmare of fire and death. Missiles filled the void like schools of deadly fish. Energy beams cut through the darkness. Ships exploded and burned and died. The Zethrians fought with the desperation of defenders. They knew if they lost, their civilization would end. But the humans fought with the fury of the wronged. And fury is a terrible weapon. Lieutenant Jamal Rodriguez flew his fighter through impossible odds, his hands steady on the controls despite the chaos around him. He had survived Threshold Point and learned from it. Now he led his squadron with skill beyond his years, protecting the larger ships and hunting enemy fighters with cold efficiency. Captain Sarah Chen commanded the vigilance through the thick of the battle, her ship's weapons never silent. She had found New Harmony's ruins, had seen what the Zethrians were capable of. Now she made them pay for it, one enemy ship at a time. The quantum targeting system gave humanity its edge. While Zethrian ships fought as individuals, human ships fought as a single organism. When one ship was damaged, others covered it. When a weakness was found, the entire fleet exploited it. It was like watching a wolf pack hunt, each member knowing exactly where the others were and what they were doing. But the Zethrians had numbers, and numbers counted for something. Human ships fell under concentrated fire. The destroyer Valiant exploded, taking all hands with it. The cruiser Defiance was crippled and drifted helplessly until enemy fire finished it. The carrier Constellation lost half its fighter wings in the first hour. Admiral Kane's flagship, the Indomitable, pushed deep into the enemy formation. It was a calculated risk. If they could break through to where the Zethrian command ships clustered, they could disrupt the enemy's coordination. All power to forward shields, Kane ordered as enemy fire intensified. Keep pushing. Do not stop. The Indomitable shuddered under multiple impacts. Alarms blared. Damage reports flooded in. But the ship kept moving forward, its weapons blazing, carving a path through the enemy fleet. Behind them, 20 human destroyers followed in the wake, exploiting the gap the Indomitable had created. It was the same tactic humans had used for thousands of years. Concentrate force at a single point and break through. The Zethrian command ship, the pride of the Concordat, saw the danger too late. The human wedge formation was driving straight toward it. High Counselor Vexthor, who had insisted on commanding from the battle himself to inspire his forces, realized his mistake. "All ships protect the command ship," he ordered frantically. But it was too late. The Indomitable's main weapons had been charging, drawing power from every non-essential system. Now Kane gave the order. Fire. The massive energy beam crossed the distance in a heartbeat. It struck the pride of the Concordat's shields, and for a moment they held. Then they collapsed, and the beam burned through armor like it was paper. It cored the ship from bow to stern, cutting it in half. High Counselor Vexthor died in that instant, along with the entire Zethrian command staff. The species that had casually ordered the destruction of New Harmony learned what it felt like to lose everything in a flash of light. But the victory came at a cost. Without shields and with power diverted to weapons, the Indomitable was vulnerable. Zethrian ships, enraged by the loss of their commander, concentrated their fire. Beam after beam hammered into the flagship. "Shields are gone!" Williams shouted over the noise. Hull breaches on multiple decks, life support failing. Kane gripped his command chair as the ship shook around him. He could feel the Indomitable dying beneath his feet, could hear the screams of wounded crew members over the intercom. But the mission was not complete. "Redirect all remaining power to the weapons," he ordered calmly. "All of it. Sir, that will leave us defenseless." "Do it." The last of the ship's power flowed into the main railgun. One shot, one final strike. Kane aimed it himself, his hand steady despite the chaos, despite knowing he was about to die. He targeted the largest Zethrian dreadnought, the ship that was leading the counterattack. "For New Harmony," he whispered, and fired. The hypersonic projectile crossed space and struck the Zethrian dreadnought in its reactor section. The ship exploded in a flash that briefly outshone the system's sun. The blast wave disabled 6 nearby Zethrian cruisers. The Indomitable had no power left. No shields, no engines, just a dead hull floating in space. Zethrian ships moved in to finish it. "All hands abandon ship," Kane ordered. "Get to the escape pods." "That's an order. What about you, sir?" Williams asked, though she already knew the answer. Kane smiled sadly. "A captain goes down with his ship. It's an old tradition. Now go. Live. Tell them what we did here." Williams saluted, tears in her eyes, and ran for the escape pods with the surviving crew. Kane stayed in his command chair, watching through the cracked view screen as Zethrian ships approached. He felt no fear, only a deep weariness. He had done what he set out to do. He had made them pay. He had shown them that humanity could not be dismissed. He hoped it was enough. But before the Zethrians could fire, something unexpected happened. The remaining human fleet, seeing their admiral's flagship in danger, converged on his position. 200 ships pushed through impossible fire to shield the Indomitable, to protect their commander even though he had ordered them to focus on the mission. "Negative on abandoned ship order," came Captain Chen's voice over the radio. "We're coming to get you, Admiral. The Vigilance is en route with a boarding team." Kane felt emotion well up in his chest. Pride, gratitude, love for these incredible people who refused to leave him behind. "You should be focusing on the mission," he said, his voice rough. "The mission is almost complete, sir. The Zethrians are breaking. They have lost half their fleet. They are requesting terms of surrender, but we are not accepting those terms until we get you out of there." Kane looked at his tactical display. It was true. The Zethrian fleet was collapsing, ships fleeing in every direction. They had broken. Humanity had won. The Vigilance pulled alongside the Indomitable, and Captain Chen's boarding team crossed over. They found Admiral Kane still sitting in his command chair, surrounded by sparks and smoke, refusing to leave his post until the battle was over. "Come on, sir," Chen said gently, helping him to his feet. "Time to go home." The Zethrian Concordat surrendered unconditionally 3 hours later. Of their 1,700 ships, fewer than 400 remained. The human fleet had lost 307 vessels, but they held the field. They had won. The terms of surrender were simple. The Zethrians would dismantle their offensive fleet. They would pay reparations to rebuild New Harmony. They would release all conquered species. They would never again threaten humanity or any other species without provocation. Admiral Kane, recovered and back on a temporary flagship, met with the new Zethrian leadership via holoconference. They expected him to demand their complete destruction, to glass their world as they had done to New Harmony. Instead, he surprised them. "We did not come here to become monsters," Kane said. "We came here to deliver a message. That message is simple. Human lives matter. You cannot murder our people and expect no consequences. But we are not you. We do not kill civilians. We do not destroy worlds. We fight soldiers, not children." The Zethrian leaders, expecting death, could barely process this mercy. "Why?" one of them asked. "Why spare us? After what we did?" Kane thought of New Harmony, of Elena Volkov's sacrifice, of all the souls lost in this war. Because someone has to be better. Someone has to show that justice and mercy can coexist. You will spend generations rebuilding what you destroyed and making amends for what you did. That is a harsher punishment than death, and it gives your species a chance to become something better. He leaned forward. "But understand this, we will be watching. Always. If you ever threaten humanity or any other species again, we will return. And next time there will be no mercy. Make sure your children's children remember that." The conference ended and Kane sat back in his chair, exhausted beyond measure. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Williams asked. "I think we did the human thing," Kane replied. "We proved we could destroy them, but we also proved we could choose not to. In the end, that is what defines us. Not our capacity for violence, but our capacity for restraint." The Armada of Retribution turned toward home, carrying their wounded and their dead. It would take months to return to Earth, months to process what they had done and what it had cost. But they had accomplished their mission. New Harmony had been avenged, and the galaxy had learned a lesson about humanity. Years later, a new colony rose on Kepler 442f, built with Zethrian reparations and human determination. They called it New Harmony, just as before, refusing to let the name die. A memorial stood at its center, listing all 47,000 names of those who had died in the original colony. Admiral Kane, now truly retired, visited on the anniversary of the attack. He was an old man now, his hair completely white, his body tired. But he came every year to remember. A group of young Zethrians came with him, part of a cultural exchange program. They were too young to remember the war, born after the surrender. They carried flowers to place at the memorial, their way of honoring the dead their ancestors had created. Kane watched them with mixed emotions. The young Zethrians seemed genuinely remorseful for what their species had done. Perhaps there was hope after all. Perhaps mercy had been the right choice. He stood before the memorial, reading names he had memorized long ago. Sarah Martinez and her children, James Chen, who had tried so hard to save his people, So many others all gone in fire and fury. I hope we made you proud, Cain whispered to the memorial. I hope what we built from your loss was worth the cost. A gentle wind blew across the new farmland, carrying the scent of growing wheat. Children played in the distance, human and alien together, learning from each other, building a better future. Cain smiled. Perhaps this was the real victory. Not the battles won or enemies defeated, but the peace that came after, the choice to build rather than destroy, to forgive rather than to hate, to hope rather than despair. The Armada of Retribution had entered the system all those years ago, bringing fury and fire. But it was mercy, not vengeance, that truly defined humanity's strength. That was the lesson the galaxy learned. That was the legacy of New Harmony. And in the end, that made all the difference.